Hi, my name is Vanessa Murrell.
My name is Mayorga, and we are founders of DATEAGLE Art, a London-based contemporary art platform supporting emerging artists.
So together we're curating Prevent This Tragedy. It's our fourth exhibition and it will be located at Post Institute by Goetz Art in Brixton. So we founded DATEAGLE Art in 2017 when we arrived to London, and it started as a response on discovering what was happening in the emerging arts scene today. We found that online there was not much information about emerging arts. Usually the artists spoken are always the same names. Big artists, male. We wanted to find things that excited us, our generation of artists. So we started visiting artists, interviewing them, writing blogs, and it developed into curation.
This is the fourth show that we curate so far. Firstly, we started with the Spread the Virus, which is an online-based exhibition. Then we went for the Panther show, and after that, Home Alone, which was an exhibition based in our house, in our home.
Now with Prevent This Tragedy, we're exploring an industrial site, the decay, the materiality of this place. So it's quite exciting curatorially to approach all these different sites and explore placing art in environments which you don't usually see art, as we're usually presented with a white gallery space with a final work. But we're very much inclined in seeing the work in a different context, and a context that we can all relate to.
As the space is going to be demolished, we thought it would be a nice opportunity for some of the artists to work on site in creating these site-specific works.
So Prevent This Tragedy will showcase works of 9 artists, many of them who respond to themes of tragedy, from the anthropological to the architectural, gentrification, displacement, image making in society, other contemporary issues like the death of painting, or some of these artists explore them through gravity, things, objects which are precariously installed. They almost seem as falling or detached. Tension, there's ruins, decay, death, humanity. We've got 4 artists doing site specifics: Linington, Richardson, Woodall, and Andrea Wright.
My name is Andrea Wright, and this is my work La Place Transform. The piece is basically an accreted latex surface that's been painted over time with various layers and then peeled off to reveal the accreted surface. The light underneath is neon, and it's responding to the industrial elements of this site. The piece has a sense of its dynamic trajectory as I've peeled it off, that it's folded and just lightly layered here over the steel structure. This area and these buildings are known for their use in industrial component building, and so this steel piece is responding to that industrial nature of these kinds of buildings. It kind of emulates a sense of an architectural skin, and the accreted surface has all those phenomenological aspects of the place, in the sense of the peeling paint, the damp, the sort of moss that's going on here. Everything that's on that surface has been peeled off and has this sense of a kind of ghostly image of the original surface.
Hello, my name is Simon Linington and we are at my studio in Greenwich, southeast London. For the show Prevent This Tragedy, I am showing 3 pieces of work. 2 pieces from a site-specific installation called Not to Be Trusted, and the 3rd piece is called Souvenir 2018, which will be exhibited in the main space alongside the other artists. The piece in the main space, Souvenir 2018, the year is part of the title because it's an ongoing series called Souvenir, which I think the first one I made was in 2014, which was a tube hung on the wall, and it contained studio detritus and historic artworks of mine which were broken down, crushed, sorted into colour, size, like the colour stratas in a cliff. For this show, I'm putting the same studio material but into a vitrine, so we have much wider lengths of material. So they have the freedom to move more throughout the thing which is containing them. The reason I began using broken down materials in tubes for Souvenir was as a young person, I grew up on the Isle of Wight, and I would walk around the beach because the island is surrounded by beaches. Walk around and kind of just look at the cliffs. And I'd walk for miles and miles. It's 70 miles all the way around. And the Isle of Wight is quite famous for its different coloured sands. So in the cliff you see these different stripes throughout. My family, they used to own shops which sold tourist souvenirs, and these were the coloured sands taken from the cliff, famously Allen Bay in the west end of the island. And it just sort of occurred to me one day when I was drawing with chalk actually and sweeping the dust off the ground that it looked a bit like the coloured sand. So that's when I first decided I would try to use the material in that form, kind of a deconstructed form. For not to be trusted, the 2 elements, the bucket and the cloth, is part of this continuing theme of the mind and body duality. The bucket is representative of the mind, the bucket containing the water, and the cloth of the body, that water has in it, like our mind, a certain memory. So everything that has taken place in that space is contained in that water used to clean a room.
I'm Frances Richardson, and for Prevent This Tragedy I'm showing 2 new pieces of work which are installed in the gallery. They're made from concrete canvas. I thought it was a perfect opportunity to use them for a site-specific installation, especially in this building, which is brilliant. I do like the fact that it feels like a working space still. You know, like it's got that energy to it. I think what's really exciting about showing in a space like this is that it allows you the potential to be slightly experimental, but also you can work on a large scale without too much administrational infrastructure going into it. So the titles of the piece, they both had the initial title Performed Object and then the date in which they were made. And it's something that I kind of developed a way of working with the material which sort of demands a performance when you're working with it. So it's flexible, it comes on a roll, and then you can make a shape with it, and then you wet it, and then it sets hard. So between the time of unrolling it and its setting is like an orchestrated performance.
I'm Vasilis Asimakopoulos. I'm showing 3 pieces which are called sulfur slabs that are on the wall, and one more which is called downer, which is on the floor, appropriately. The sulfur slabs essentially are made from soundproofing foam that is then enriched with resin, and it solidifies, and then sulfur in dust form is applied on them. They seem to reference in some way sort of like maybe minimalist or very strict sort of modernist sculpture, possibly. And they have a bit of an alienating sort of appearance. As for downer, it's essentially a found textile type of chair, which part of it is removed, the legs and everything. It's got a weird kind of, again, maybe very modernist type of shape, and I would say quite sensual, even though it's from a very, very big sort of furniture retailer from Scandinavia. But it's left outside, it's collected mold, and then washed again, and the mold has essentially dyed the textile naturally. Upon that is a small sort of mound, if you will, of marble dust. And it seems, even though it looks very pure, it seems to have a bit of a weight to it. And so essentially, when I named it downer, it was not because it was on the floor. The initial reaction to when I did it was more psychological, because a downer is, you know, obviously you're not feeling very well, so it seemed like it was sort of grab at the pit of your stomach in some way.
Hi, my name is Evie, and we're here at the Bomb Factory Art Foundation in my studio in North London. So this work here is called Sisypha. It's something I made originally just over a year ago, and it's part of a larger body of work that looks at sort of material synthesis and how we seek to replicate stone in contemporary society, and mostly explores the validity of stone, so why it's so important to us, why stone has almost a reverent quality. And for me, it was always interesting to find all these various replicas to make stone out of plastics and polystyrene and polymer-based materials. So I started creating selection of fake stones, so looking at this topic of materiality, but also creating them in a way that was reminiscent of traditional forms of sort of stacking stones like cairns, or the sculpted figure, often the female figure. And eventually it brought me to make this work, which is, well, it's called Sisypha, like the female version of Sisyphus. And it's a bit giant polystyrene rock on wheels, strapped to a base, and it's drilled into the base, but there's a strap that will run round it eventually, to make it look as if it's just strapped and it's a rock being carted around. And it's a sculpture in itself, but it's also a prop for a performance piece. So wherever it gets exhibited, it is the duty of the gallerist, the female gallerist, or the gallery assistant, to take it out for a walk down the high street or down the street that the gallery is on every day. So the myth of Sisyphus that inspired the work, it's quite complex. And initially when I started making the work, I was referencing my memory of the myth, which was that a guy, a human, a mortal, was punished to eternally cut or push a rock up the hill. And the moment he gets the rock to nearly the top of the hill, it slips off his shoulders and falls down, and it's this eternal job that he needs to do, because his only salvation is when he pushes the rock to the top of the mountain. He never quite achieves it. So for me, the work really looks at that burden of humanity or of mankind and us carting it around. Also, and why I called the stone Sisypha and had, in a sense, put the female as the leading figure now, sort of carting this burden of mankind, trying to change paradigms.
My name's Jim Woodall, and this is a piece of work called Part, which was created for the Prevent This Tragedy show. It's a concrete wall and kind of an architectural intervention into the space to create a part of a building that could collapse throughout the exhibition. So it's a kind of forced entropy in some way. There's a chemical process within it, which is calcium oxide and ferric oxide, which when pushed into the concrete forces it apart. So it creates a resistance between the material and the insertion of chemical. I like the play between a material or a process which is intended to create strength, and that I'm adding this weakness to it. And the weakness creates instability and a kind of anticipation for its collapse. And I think that crux, or that moment of just before collapse, is what I'm interested in working with in some way, either as a performative element or as just an idea to explore.